everyone to We Are Triathletes webinar series. I'm Hillary Topper, and today's guest is Dr. Jeff Poplarski, who is on the forefront of chiropractic injury recovery and injury prevention. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Jeff. So Dr. Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your practice and actually how you got into this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I've been in practice, I think 1995. I'm coming across my 25th anniversary. I can't believe it. But I am a doctor of chiropractic with a practice in Amityville. And chiropractors are the largest drugless healthcare providers in the United States of America. And we're extremely popular for that reason, because with the opioid crisis and the addictions of painkillers, more and more people are seeking out the wellness aspect of it. The reason why I mention it is that's how I became a chiropractor. For whatever reason, innately, I was always against drugs, whether it was prescription medications, whether it was recreational drugs. And, as a kid, that was just something. I guess maybe it was from my parents, but then, that drove me into the chiropractic profession. I just love that tone of not using drugs or surgeries and just letting the body kind of heal itself through the natural remedies. And that's how I became a doctor of chiropractic. But it's been a great ride for 25 years. I'm involved in a lot of different things, as you know, through the chiropractic philosophy, U.S. Opens, Tunnel to Towers, teaching at 2 Long Island universities, doing sports performance work all around, the state, all around, actually around the country, and just doing some cool things through, the chiropractic message.
So can you talk a little bit about some of the new techniques for injury recovery?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of hot things out there. One of my favorite things that's coming to the forefront is a technique called Eldoa, E-L-D-O-A, which is a technique to stretch the fascia in the body. The way I describe the fascia is your anatomy almost looks like a roast beef hero if you would look at your muscles. Layers of beef, and in between the roast beef, you have layers of lettuce, just like a roast beef sandwich, and that's kind of how the anatomy appears in the body. And that lettuce is the fascia. It's the covering around the segments of the muscle. So there's a technique out there called Eldoa, which stretches these fascial planes, and you put your body in these unique positions to stretch. For instance, Tiger Woods won the Masters this year. I know we're dealing with triathletes here in these conversations, but Tiger wins, and everybody's like, how did he come up? He had 5 surgeries. How did he make the comeback? But he was working with an Eldoa specialist, and it's a very, very popular technique. That's one thing that you could actually do on your own. I'm actually going through training for Eldoa. The process of Eldoa actually starts in bed. As soon as you wake up in bed, there are 3 Eldoa postures that you do to start to get the blood going into the fascia. It's a very awesome technique. So that's one technique that I love. Certainly the hyperbaric medicine, which hyperbarics has been around for many, many years, but now it's becoming very, very mainstream. I happen to have the chamber in the office, which induces more oxygen into your body. I always tell people you breathe around 21% oxygen. In the normal ambient air, you go into the chamber, it's 100%. Everybody's using it for recovery. Another thing is the cryotherapy, which is the full body immersion up to your head with liquid nitrogen in a tank, where it brings you down to about 212 below zero. It's a quick little 2-3 minute treatment, and that's a good recovery tool. You might have saw something in the news about that recently. The receiver for the Oakland Raiders, who's now the receiver for the New England Patriots, who's an all-pro, went into one of those chambers and actually got his feet burned. I'm not here to say bad things, but I think he stayed in a little too long, and he wound up getting these blisters and missed the NFL camp because of it. So it got some negative attention, but it's certainly safe and effective. So those would be 3 things that are really, really popular from a recovery standpoint.
Okay, so talk to us a little bit about some of the common injuries that occur among runners and triathletes.
Sure. Yeah, so whenever you work with the different athletic population, there's always the prevalence of injuries. From a running standpoint, its majority is lower extremity. I don't get too many runners that come to me, with a shoulder problem or a wrist problem, unless they fell, unless they're doing other sports. So we always talk about this. When you run, it's around 5 times your body weight into your lower body. So if you weigh 100 pounds and you're running, that's 500 pounds of force into your toes and your ankles and your knees. So what are the more common injuries? Well, plantar fasciitis, there's the covering again, in the heel and in the foot. Certainly ankle problems, whether it's maybe a sprain or a strain. And then you're just going up the chain. Knee problems, meniscus, which are the shock-absorbing jelly material in between the knee. That compressional force could disturb the tissue there. Maybe ACLs too, which is a big kind of a rubber band structure internally in the knee. So from a running perspective, you're looking at that lower body, the ankles, and also the knees. So my job, and I always tell this to runners, for every 1,000 hours of sport participation as a runner, you're going to sustain 2 musculoskeletal injuries every 1,000 hours. So how do you prevent that? Well, we just talked a little bit about recovery. There's other things we need to talk about too. But from a running standpoint, someone comes in, let's look at the feet, let's look at the knees. Now, from a biking standpoint, it kind of changes. Now you're looking into the pelvic area. You're looking into the hip area. You're looking into the hip flexors, which is that big muscle that creates the flexion of the hips. Obviously, as a cyclist, you're going through millions and millions of movements of hip flexion. So we're always looking at the hips, the pelvis, the hip flexors, and anything that supports muscular-wise around those areas. I'm also seeing, too, with bicyclists, is neck problems. And because you're on the bike and your head is slightly in that extended position, all the muscles in the back of the neck are constantly turned on through that 1 hour bike or whatever, 2 hours of biking. That neck is up, and now you can start getting some irritation into the neck area. So that's kind of some general description of injuries, but I always like to go through that statistic. 1,000 hours of participation, how are we going to get that down to 0 musculoskeletal injuries? And that's some of the things we do in our office.
So how do you go about preventing some of these injuries?
Yeah, so you're back to what we discussed initially, that Aldoa. Most people are stretching the muscles. And I don't want to confuse your audience, but there's some theories here that muscles do not even stretch. Your muscle is your muscle. So if you have a muscle that's 24 inches long, you could stretch that till the cows come home. It's never going to elongate. What will elongate, though, is the fascia. And that's why the Aldoa, people in the stretching world are saying, to sit there and touch your toes for 30 seconds is almost a waste of time. Do these Aldoa postures, which will open up the fascia. So that would be one way to reduce injuries. You always have to remember that 50 to 70% of your total body weight is water. So if you're going to do a training session and you're going in there without the proper hydration and you're dehydrated, and maybe the muscle volume of water is 50%, that muscle is going to be really susceptible to an injury. So there's a whole nutritional component of this. So the hydration, very important. How much did you drink? Half your body weight in ounces of water. We always discuss that. If you weigh 100 pounds, cut it in half, 50 ounces of water. Another thing I would recommend to your viewers is that minerals, we're back to nutrition again, preventing injuries. Minerals make those muscles contract. So as you're running and you're doing, a 10-mile run, those muscles are contracting and needs minerals. So if you're depleted of minerals while you're running, you're going to be susceptible to an injury. So how do you get the right amount of minerals in? Eat 4 to 6 pieces of fruits and vegetables every day. That will ensure you have the proper minerals, supplementation. Those are just 2 or 3 things that come off the top of my mind. There's hundreds of things you could do. I have a little handout that I give runners. It's a 15-point checklist. Too much too soon running downhill, gait cycle, inflexibility, muscular imbalance, heel strike, toe strike, the heel strike itself as you're running. These are all things that have to be addressed if you want longevity. If you want to stay in sport for a long time, which most people want to do, come in and I'll show you the 15-point checklist, and let's address each one of those. But those are just a couple of quick tips there for your audience.
So let's talk a little bit about what you said about the minerals. So, I mean, would cramping, when you're getting cramps like leg cramps, or even when you're swimming, sometimes you get toe cramps or
Yes.
what have you. I mean, is that all part of the mineral thing, or is it something that, or you should be doing Aldoa or whatever?
Yeah. That's a great question. So we wound up doing an article for Newsday a couple of years ago about minerals. And I told Newsday that there are the three most common ways to get cramping is one is mineral depletion / dehydration. Two is just overuse. If you pound into a joint, 4 million times, the muscles might get irritated and go into cramping. And the third most common way to get a cramp is actually medications. There are a lot of medications that people take, like Lipitor, for instance, which is for lowering cholesterol, could have the effect of actually creating cramps. A lot of my patients in the middle of the night go into violent cramping that aren't even athletes, but they're taking a lot of medications that those meds rob the dehydration, rob the minerals, and then they get cramping. So from an athlete perspective, you need to get those minerals in. We work a lot of events. I'll just tell you one quick story. I was working a road running race. A guy finishes the event and he's in violent cramping in his abdomen and the big muscle groups. By the way, that's usually what cramps, the big muscle groups, the quads, the glutes, the abs. So this guy goes into violent cramping and he's a little disorientated. So I'm saying he's either dehydrated or he doesn't have enough minerals, because minerals make the brain and spinal cord work too, by the way. They send the signals to the muscle. And this guy's severely dehydrated. I sent him to the emergency room. The doctor called me, said, great move. You wait another 5 minutes, this guy could have had a seizure and died. That's how important it is. So to have the proper minerals in the body to make it contract. So that's the number way you're going to get it. I just worked a soccer game 2 Saturdays ago. 8 kids went down with cramping. It was an overtime soccer game, and I talked to the coach. I just show up to cover the game. I don't know the athletes. I'm doing the emergency medical stuff. And the guy goes, well, you got to see my students. They're not eating right. They're not drinking. They're not taking care of their body, and they expect to go out and play a 2.5-hour soccer game. We had 8 issues with cramping during soccer.
Terrible.
Throw hot weather on top of it, too. That becomes an issue, too. Although you could get cramps in cold weather, too.
So you mentioned about meniscus, and that seems like it seems like everybody's tearing the meniscus. Is there a way to recover from meniscus injury without doing surgery?
Another great question. So let's go over the anatomy of the meniscus. There's shock absorbing circular discs in between your knee joints. So when you're running, they're taking the pressure off the 2 bones that hit each other. The biggest issue with the meniscus is the meniscus, just this is the way we're made, has a really bad blood supply. So something that has a bad blood supply is going to be susceptible to an injury. Now you tear it. Now you're trying to rehab it. It's got a bad blood supply. What's the name of the game in rehab? Get as much blood back into the area as possible so it could heal. Now the meniscus doesn't have that, and that becomes a problem. There is that chondroitin and glucosamine. Have you heard of that? Glucosamine sulfate and chondroitin, a supplement that has the same material as a meniscus. I actually sell a really good pharmaceutical grade Nutrimetrics in my office that I give the athletes to take first thing in the morning. You drink it, it goes right into the joint. It's almost like injecting it into your the bloodstream, but I sell it in my office. But that's one thing I do. So supplementation is certainly important. The mechanics of the lower body is certainly important. And then weight distribution. You got to have that good BMI, because if you are overweight or you're obese and you're running or you're a triathlon on top of it, you're going in a direction where you're eventually going to have a meniscal tear. So there is ways to prevent it. One would be supplementation. I do a drill with some of my athletes. I just take a foot and I pretend we're putting it in a 4x4 box. Think about taking your foot, standing up, putting it in a 4x4 box, and I tell the athlete to take the knee and almost grind it. and hit all the corners of the box, which is almost like doing a circle with the knee to prepare it for when you're going to go run or when you're going to go bicycling. I saw the New York Knicks do that a handful of years ago. I was at a practice and the trainers were doing that. And it's just you do it clockwise and you do it counterclockwise. And it kind of kicks up some blood into the meniscus to prepare you for whatever athletic endeavor you're going to do.
Let's talk a little bit more about the hyperbaric baric chamber.
Sure.
Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah.
So you said that it puts more oxygen into your body, and that's how it helps recovery.
Yeah.
What exactly happens? Can you describe what the experience is like going into this chamber? I think a lot of people might feel a little bit claustrophobic, so maybe you could address that.
Yeah. Yeah. So going into the chamber, people look at it, it looks like a big torpedo. What I'm going to tell you is about 600 active NFL players have hyperbaric chambers in their house. So an NFL player average is like 6'5", like 280. So when people do go in the chamber, what they tell me is like, wow, I didn't realize how big this is. You know, it's kind of spacious. It's almost like going in a tent and camping. A lot of those NFL guys, too, by the way, sleep with their significant others in the chamber. So 2 people could stay in the chamber, just to give you this, the size of it. I saw a study. Obviously, I'm going to use it to my advantage. 91% of the people that say they're claustrophobic, diagnostically, are really not claustrophobic. So we always talk about that word fear, right? Forgetting everything's going to be all right. So people get a little weird, but we do put them in and we talk them through it, and it's actually, they have no issues with it. So I've worked with the chamber at 15 U.S. Opens. I've had it in my office just for 1 year. And I put a couple hundred people in the chamber in the 1 year. I've never had a person say, I want to get out because I feel like I'm claustrophobic. So the feeling is actually they feel comfortable. You know, there's pillows in there. There's a bed type mattress in there. There's windows there. If they want to come out, there's a safety valve that they could just take all the air out within 2 minutes and actually come out. So we have really no problems with claustrophobia.
Interesting. So we have a question. When you're preparing for a race and trying to get proper hydration, should you count fruit and vegetables that have high water content to your water targets?
Yeah, that's great. Another great question. I teach nutrition, by the way, at Farmingdale State College. I think you knew that. So what I tell people that half their body weight, that's just straight water. Yes, you can get water from fruits and vegetables. That's just a bonus. That's a bonus on top of it. Let's do the half your body weight in waters. If you're doing 4-6 pieces of fruits and vegetables, some celery, oranges, whatever you're going to choose to do, that's just a bonus, because you can never, at this avenue of athleticism, you can never drink too much water. You actually can, but you'd have to drink like 2,000 ounces of water. And physiologically, people can't even do that. There was 2 reported instances of punishment tactic where they had a child drink water, stay in a corner and drink water all day. It was 1,500 ounces. And the child died of what's called hyponatremia, which means low sodium. It drank so much water, it diluted the minerals. You physically couldn't do that unless someone was putting, a threat to you. You get up to 200-300 ounces of water, you're going to be seeing that's it. So you can never really drink that, that much water where it's going to be in effect. So let's keep the fruits and vegetables as just a bonus into this program.
Cool. All right, so talk to us now. I know you're the medical director of Tunnel to Tower event on September 29th, and also for the Stair Climb series, which starts in June of 2020 again. Can you talk a little bit about those events?
Yeah, it's, you know what, as you just said those words, I actually get goosebumps in my body all the time because it's such an unbelievable, powerful event. The Tunnel to Towers run, which is on September 29th of this year on a Sunday, was created from a gentleman by the name of Steven Silla. Steven Silla was a fireman on 9/11, was actually going to play golf with his brothers here on Long Island, heard the buildings were attacked, went back to his firehouse in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and the whole firehouse was gone. They were down at the site. He took his 65-pound Scott pack, went to the mouth of the tunnel, They were letting nobody in. The only people who could go in was emergency, like no vehicles. And they said, listen, you want to go down, you run. And he ran 1.8 miles through the tunnel, another 3/4 of a mile out of the tunnel to the South Tower, and he wasn't seen after that. So what the Silla family did is they recreated this run for an American hero. I've been with the organization for 17 years. And we have a mission statement, and the mission statement is let us do good. Whenever you see somebody in the United States of America that has some sorrow behind it of significance, like a police officer being shot or a first responder dying or a military personnel being catastrophically injured, we say, we have a contract with you. You protect our country. You go to Afghanistan. You go wherever you got to do to protect the country. You put out fires for us. Don't worry. Because if something happens to you, we're going to knock on your door and we're going to pay off the mortgage if it's your wife or your husband and take care of your children. And we've been doing that for 17 years. You might have heard about the organization. Incredible work. So that's the run September 29th. What we did, 5K, by the way, advertised. It's really about 2.7 miles because it's what Stephen actually ran. Then what we did about 4 years ago, we created the stair climb up One World Trade Center, which is like 1/4 of a mile straight up. We only allow 1,000 people to do it. We did it for the first 2 years, which was incredible. But then we found out that there's actually a worldwide stair climb series with the top 10 largest buildings in the world, Dubai and wherever these buildings are, and we're one of them. And now we're part of that series where there are professional runners that run up. Now, the average person, it takes 1/4 of a mile. It takes about 40 minutes to do. But these professionals are doing it like less than 10 minutes. They don't stop. They do the whole thing straight up. They don't stop one flight of stairs and they go up. Where most of the other people, they go 10 flights and take a rest. So we're part of that series now. Not only are we part of that series, I believe, don't hold me 100% to this, we had 106 Tunnel to Towers run this year. States around the United States call us, Savannah, Georgia, San Jose, Rochester, New York, say, we'd like to put a Tunnel to Towers on in our community, and we allow them to do that. So we had over 100 runs, including Kandahar, Afghanistan, on 9/11. That military base woke up and did a Tunnel to Towers run that day. So it's just an amazing group, and I'm really honored to be involved with it.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good for you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Another question, a follow-up question to the hydration question was, you mentioned some of the medication can rob you of nutrients. Are there any foods that can also do the same thing?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, there are foods that create inflammation, and there are foods that actually de-inflame you. So think of alcohol. That would probably be the biggest. Alcohol is an oxygen with a hydrogen. When you drink an alcoholic beverage, it goes in your body through a chemical reaction. OH wants to become H2O. So it's looking for water. It will start to rob your water. So there are foods. High-fat foods might have an effect of that because it takes a lot of water to break down fat. And probably a good one is protein. If you increase your protein load, for whatever reason, maybe you want to gain some muscle mass, the more protein you eat, the more water you need because there are bonds in between the amino acids, which is the simplest form of protein. It takes a lot of water to cleave or break that protein. So if you increase protein, it could lead to dehydration and losing your water unless you start to accelerate your water. So I'd watch out for protein if you're going to increase it. Alcohol certainly shouldn't obviously be in a nutritional plan. And there are some fats that might create dehydration also.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff, for being on today. And we really appreciate your time and your expertise. So thank you again. And thanks again for doing the Tower to Tunnel and the stair climb. They sound like amazing events.
Yeah, awesome. Love the opportunity. If we could help you out anytime, reach out, okay?
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. God bless. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.